It was a nice summer's day. My 5-year-old son James was playing outside in the back garden. James has always been a quiet boy. He plays by himself mostly. He never had many friends, but he has a wild imagination. I was in the kitchen feeding our dog, Fiddle, when I heard what sounded like James talking to someone in the backyard. I'm not sure who it was. Could he have finally made a friend? Being a single dad, it's hard for me to always keep an eye on him. So I decided to go outside and check up on him. When I went into the back garden, I was a bit confused. James was the only person in the back. Was he talking to himself? But I could have sworn that I heard another voice. "Hey, James! It's time to come inside!" I called out to him. He came inside and sat down at the kitchen table. It was about lunchtime, so I decided to make him a turkey. "Hey, James, who are you talking to out there?" "My new friend," he said, smiling. I poured him a glass of milk and continued to pry. "Does your friend have a name? Why didn't you ask him to have lunch with us?" James stared at me for a while before replying. "His name is Laughing Jack." "Oh, that's a strange name. What does your friend look like, James?" "He's a clown. He has long hair and a big, swirly cone nose. He's got long arms and baggy pants with stripy socks. And he always smiles." I realised my son was talking about an imaginary friend. I suppose it is normal for kids his age to have imaginary friends, especially when he has no real friends to play with. It's probably just a phase. The rest of the day went by as usual, and it was starting to get late, so I put James to bed. I tucked him in, gave him a kiss, and made sure to turn on the nightlight before I closed the door. I was pretty tired myself, so I decided to go back to bed. But I had a awful nightmare. It was dark. I was in some kind of run-down amusement park. I was scared, running through an endless field of empty tents, broken down rides, and abandoned game huts. The whole place had a horrible look to it. Everything was black and white. The prized stuffed animals all hung from nooses in the game huts, all with sick grins stitched on their faces. It felt like the whole park was looking at me, even though there wasn't another living thing in sight. Then, suddenly, I began to hear music play. It sounded like Pop Goes the Weasel, but being played on a squeeze box that echoed through the park. It was hypnotizing. I followed its tune to the circus tent, unable to stop my legs from moving forward. I couldn't see a thing. It was pitch black. The only light came from a single spotlight shining on the center of the big top. As I walked toward the light, the music slowed down. I found myself singing along, unable to stop. The lights shot on. The intensity of the light was practically blinding. All I could see was a small dark silhouette shuffle towards me. Then another one appeared, and another one, and another one. There were dozens of them, all coming towards me. I couldn't move. My legs were frozen. All I could do was watch as the haunting figures drew closer. As they got closer, I could see they were children! As I looked at each one, I noticed that they were all horribly disfigured and mutilated. Some had cuts all over their body, others were severely burned, and others were missing limbs, even eyes. The children devoured me, clawing at my flesh, dragging me to the ground and tearing me up. As the children tore me apart and I faded away, all I could hear was the laughter. The horrible, awful, evil laughter. I woke up the next morning in a cold sweat. After taking a few deep breaths, I looked over and saw that a few of James' action figures were positioned facing me at the top of the nightstand. I sighed. James had probably woken me up early and put these here. I gathered up the old toys and made my way to James' room. However, when I opened the door, James was sound asleep. I just shrugged it off and placed the toys back into his toy box, and headed out into the living room. A little while later, James woke up, and I made him his favourite breakfast. He was quiet and seemed a bit groggy. Perhaps he didn't sleep well either. I decided to ask him about his toys. James, did you put these toys in Mummy's room this morning? His eyes shut up at me for a moment, then quickly glanced back at his cereal. Laughing Jack did it. I sighed and rolled my eyes to one side of the room, and responded, "Well, you tell Laughing Jack to keep the toys in your room." James nodded and finished up his breakfast. Then he decided to go play out in the backyard. I went to relax in the living room, and I must have dozed off because I woke up hours later. Shit, I need to check on James. I was a bit worried. It had been over 2 hours, and I haven't checked on him. I stepped out into the backyard, but James wasn't there. I was getting nervous, so I called out to help him. James! James, where are you? Just then, I heard a giggle from the front yard. I rushed through the gate around to the front of the house. James was sitting on the sidewalk. I breathed a sigh for relief, and I walked over to him. James, how many times have I told you to stay in the back? James, what are you doing? What are you eating? James looked up at me, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a hand full of hard candies. This made me very nervous. James, who gave you that candy? James just stared at me, not speaking. James, please! Please tell Mummy where you got that candy. James hung his head down and said, Laughing Jack gave it to me. My heart sunk. I kneeled down to look him in the eye. James, I've had enough of this damn Laughing Jack thing. He is not real. No, this is a very serious situation, and I need you to... Who gave you this candy? I could see my son's eyes tear up. But Mama, Laughing Jack did give me that candy. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. James has never lied to me, but what he's telling me is impossible. I made him spit out the candy, and I threw the rest away. James appears to be fine. Maybe I'm just overreacting. After all, he could have gotten it from Tom or Lindy from next door, or Mr. Walker down the street. Either way, I'm going to have to keep a close eye on James. That night I put James to bed, as usual, and decided to go bed early myself. Suddenly, I was woken up by a loud bang coming from the kitchen. I sprung out of bed and hurried down the stairs. When I got to the kitchen, I was horrified. Everything on the counters had been thrown on the floor, and our dog Fiddle hung dead from the light fixture. His stomach was cut out and stuffed with candy, the same type James was eating earlier that day.